o'clock. We're going to begin our meeting for the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board. Can I have someone approve and second the view of the minutes from last meeting, please?
Roll call before you move to that item. Yes, please. Dr. Page.
All right, we'll do roll call. Mr. Costello,
Present.
Mr. Giffen,
Present.
Ms. Reed,
Here.
Mr. Fields,
Here.
Mr. Peoples.
Here.
And Ms. Castle.
Here.
And Scavenge here. Can we have someone approve the view of the minutes from 7/26/23?
What's the motion? What's the motion of minutes from 7/26.
Second.
Okay, and approval, Mr. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Giffen,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Peoples,
Yes.
Fields,
Yes.
Ms. Castle,
Yes.
and Scavenge, yes.
I don't think Mr. Fields is entitled to vote.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. Next is public comments, 30 minutes, minutes in total for each person.
I'd like to call to the podium. Costello. So
Got me saying or two?
it's gonna be a little different today.
Mhm.
I know it's weird because you're talking to us, but the microphone is actually towards that television. Perfect.
You want to stand at the end of the table there?
Sure, that's no problem. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good to see you, everybody. I brought you all some information. I'm blessed are the peacemakers, we call children of God. I want to just, come this evening, I want to remind you that my event, Mother's Lives Matter, Mom's Lives Matter, is Saturday. And I've also asked that the Moms Who Demand Action, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and all the other mothers organizations would come together. And the reason I'm bringing this to you all is because in policing, many times the mother has challenges with the processes. And I would love if some of you all's organizations would come together with me and be more supportive of the family type platforms. Here's the information again. This is my mother with me. We both graduated from Central State University. And those are my children. So I know what works and doesn't work. I just began a school of ministry under the order of Melchizedek in Warren, Ohio, last Tuesday. So if I can work with you all to help you all with the policing and that venue also. Everybody here knows I'm running for president of the United States of America for 2024. And I heard some very disturbing news, and I think I may have shared it with you previously, where the governor of Colorado signed a Kill More Babies deal. And $1.92 billion is being spent in this country currently, an estimated 1.92 in sexual trafficking of girls in this country. As a mother, that bothers me. As a registered voter, that bothers me. So as you do your processes with overseeing police processes and the procedures, one of the challenges I faced was one time a few years ago, I was beat up by law enforcement in Cleveland, Ohio. I had called them for help, and they told me that the Cleveland police beating me up, dragging me down the street after asking them for help was civil and procedure, and called me a mentally ill one. There's a whole lot to that. So how are mothers, how are women perceived, especially we women of color in this country? How are we identified with? The challenge with issue 1, which was voted down yesterday, was at the table are still all white male representation and white female counterparts, where we women of color. Okay, are not represented adequately. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention, and I hate I missed you all on Sunday. I was preaching that morning. God bless you.
Sorry, I was looking at my phone, I didn't see it. I
Sorry.
apologize.
If you need me, notify me.
All right, thank you.
Everybody have a blessed evening.
Anyone else? And I'd like to make a motion to come out of public comment.
Second.
Hey, Costa? Yeah.
Yes.
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 Get them,
Yes.
Yes.
See?
I'll get you.
okay, we,
Yes.
people,
Yes.
and Savage, yes. Okay, next is our subcommittee report out. First, we'll have the governance committee.
Yes, governance, met yesterday and, the main item of business, is that we approved, for submission to the board tonight, a resolution on rules legislation. I emailed that to all of you. Does everyone have it?
Yes.
I had a chance to see it. Does anyone on the board need a hard copy? And public, like, hard copy? And to begin discussion, I will open up this resolution.
Second. Costa?
Yes, approve, you second. Second, yes.
Costa?
Approve, yes.
And I believe it's open for discussion now. I might.
Sure.
The purpose of this resolution is to in fact, directly, it will request a law department to draft legislation to approve the rules that we adopted July 12. That's legislation for the council. We've been over this, but I think we were under the impression that it was simply going to happen without a request. But we've since learned, not directly, but indirectly, but we've learned that apparently we have to request the legislation. So the main thing that this resolution does, it actually asks the chair to make that request to the Department of Law. Also, with the chair would be requested to communicate with the president of council, asking that legislation be promptly and favorably considered. So this seems to be a necessary step to get the matter actually before council. It is in the form that it would ask that the rules as we adopt be approved by that legislation, which of course has become something of an issue. So another way to think of this resolution is that it sets up that issue for another vote by this board as to whether we indeed want to put the rules we adopted previously forward to council. So that it's a way of doing it, but it's also a necessary step to move the rules forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it this evening. We had a fairly long discussion in governance last night about it, which was helpful. But after discussion is done tonight, if there is any questions, I'm going to move to table it to the next meeting, as we did the authority resolution. When we did that, so that for one thing, I hope I will have all of our members here on the 23rd. It also gives the community and the city an opportunity to review this and comment about it if they wish. I did copy the Ms. Belvance and Mr. Angeloni have received copies of this. I heard nothing from them, though, either yesterday or today. But I think it would be wise of us to table it rather than act on it. So if there is discussion or questions, I would be happy to entertain those, or just discussion.
I have a couple questions. So prior to our last meeting, what was your understanding of the process to submit legislation? What's changed from last meeting to yesterday?
I had understood from conversations I had with Mr. Angeloni, really it was about the time we were adopting this. And I was given to understand that the law department would take care of the legislation. And that it would be at council by the 24th. And as you may recall, I let everybody know that we sort of expected to be at public safety that day, and evening with council, possibly the week after. So it was really careful about this. I don't want to get into anything in executive session, but that was the first point at which we got indirect word, I think, that we would need to request legislation. And then I've seen this, frankly, it's been in the media. Apparently there was email sent from some department of the city to the Beacon Journal, indicating that this request would have to be made. So it's really before our last meeting. I did not think we had to actually request this, but we plainly do. And also it has the advantage of, to the extent we either reaffirm or don't our previous decision about this.
So, for lack of a better term, this is basically a protocol to what to us presenting the rules. We have to do this as protocol.
Right.
Is that correct?
Correct.
But it's not changing anything that we've already voted on.
No,
Okay.
this calls for
Okay.
the legislation to seek approval of the rules as we adopt them. So if we were to adopt this, we would be in effect reaffirming that decision. And conversely, if we would choose to amend this to some other form or not adopt it this time, it's a way of not reaffirming.
Okay. So you want to table it though until so.
But if there's
more
more
members
discussion,
have
I'll
something.
move the table if we want our discussion.
Mr. Costa and Ms. Castle, you guys were in discussion on last night in reference to this. What were some of the concerns about this process that brought up last night?
I don't think necessarily a concern. I think it was just getting a sense that this is something that we need to do in order to formally request that legislation be made. I think it was my understanding as well too, when the law department had presented the process as to how, and this was not an executive session, but when we were provided an update as to how the rule adoption process would go, it kind of sounded to me as if the law department would just make legislation. And so this then, in essence, is a formal request for the production of legislation to council. I'm a fan of tabling this as well too, because we still have not received, I guess, any formal feedback from the law department. And I would appreciate their insight to the extent that they may have with respect to the rules in their current form. And so that's why I'm a fan of tabling this one, but that was just my understanding.
And I would share what both of them, I would agree with everything that was said based on our conversations. We had a great conversation last night at the committee meeting. And I think for me, as we were going through this and really reviewing this information, it was more so that as a board, we maintain that independence. So we can seek guidance when we're looking for it, but this gives us the opportunity to put forth that legislation with the content that we feel comfortable putting forth, but just refines the process. that was my takeaway from it. So it really was for me, the independence piece, just really making sure that we understand the process moving forward and we can maintain our integrity with what we put forward.
There's no other discussion on the table.
Second,
Austin,
yes. Aye.
Ms. Reed. Mr. Giffen,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Peoples.
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
and Ms. Harris, yes. Okay, so
We only have, I do have another thing to report. We spent some time, discussing the process by which we would begin to do the work to, leading to the report. What we're supposed to do annually, that would be a part of a general review operations of the police department. Not an easy task, and we talked about it. And so we had some good discussion, I think, about how we might address that broad task. And I don't just mean the governance committee, because this can have to be everything, pieces of it. So I think we're planning to meet again in 2 weeks, and I think we'll maybe begin to develop more of an outline. Or how do we divide the topics of the report? And then within that, how might we best address getting the information and developing whatever we tend to say in the report, because we really got to get that going. And again, without an auditor, not knowing when, maybe new auditor and new deputy auditor. This may be something that falls to us individually. We probably will not have staff that's going to be able to take that on for us, at least this year. So we began that work. Hopefully we'll bring something even more detailed back to you in a couple of weeks. And Brandon has been working with the Akron Law School. Hopefully we'll have some law student assistants with pieces of this that would be helpful. So that's what we discussed. Hopefully more in a couple of weeks.
question.
Yeah, the major, I guess, under the charter as set out, the major components of our annual report are us providing report out on our activities as well as our recommendations. So, just a reminder to everybody to the extent possible, the committees that you're serving on capturing, the work that you're doing, capturing photos, images, and things that we're doing in the community, so we can put forth as robust a report as possible at the end of this year.
That would primarily be the community engagement.
I mean, I think no, because I think we've been active from a number of different facets, whether that be from a hiring standpoint, in terms of some of the things that we've had to do bringing along Mr. Fields, all the way with respect to us, implementing some of our internal financial protocols. So I think just be mindful and capturing the big activities, the things that we're doing, so we can kind of report that back out. We had broadly speculated what the best method of reporting out once the report is completed next year, whether or not that made sense for us to almost do like a presentation of our findings or some type of event to that degree. So just a reminder to be ever present of the activities that you're doing on behalf of the board and capturing it so we can tell the story of what we're doing.
Okay, as you mentioned, as you talk about that, I'm just trying to sit here on the line and think about how would the human resource subcommittee do something.
I think it would be good, if I'm hearing you correctly, we could talk about the process of hiring and the interview processes that we went through with hiring our admin 3. I think that should become soon. And then we set through the
wonderful presentation by the
Yes,
city's
it was
HR
really good.
last week.
Very,
Is that what you're referring to? Mr. Costa kind of capturing that, putting it in the report.
I think, so I think that the narrative portion of our report is probably going to be critical in terms of us providing a summary as to what activities that we've engaged in. So while some of the committees, I think, might be a little bit more like robust community engagement, I think if nothing else, it does make sense to, even if it's not a super detailed summary of every interview, every meeting that took place with respect to HR committee. I think just like having a summary of the processes that I guess the high level actions that we've had to take, like going through the year. I think if I'm thinking about someone who completely has been under like a rock, the city of Akron for the last year, if they see this report, they said, well, what have they been doing for the last year? You know, enough of a summary to provide information as to the circumstances of the state of the department that we kind of took it over, versus everything that we've done throughout the balance of the year, depending on whatever point that they would be. So that was a long-winded way of saying, you know, maybe not.
So
But I
it's
think
not-
we just need a summary of all the
Right.
major activities.
the summary, it kind of sounds like a mission statement, but not a mission statement. And basically saying, you know, the human resource subcommittee has strived to hire the best person, you know, something like that.
Can I make a
Got
suggestion?
you any?
Maybe it's perhaps like a timeline. So these were the barriers, these were the action steps. So we talk about contracting and what that looked like and what we had to do to work through that process. Talking about how we had to collaborate with these different departments to bring this to fruition. And then as you guys are going through this hiring process, what were some different, you know, takeaways if we changed any of the processes as we determine whether it's admin 2, admin 3, as we continue to look down. HR will be looking at hiring our auditor and deputy auditor down the road, like how did those job descriptions get defined and what that process is. So I almost envision that would be kind of a timeline of sequential and just pulling up those higher radar items.
Okay, well,
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, actually. That's
Tristan,
I thought that was a great suggestion, and I'm certain it sounds like more an overview, a report that CEOs would give at the end of the year, so we can absolutely construct something.
yeah, just like a paragraph to like that, like we did for Sundays.
The biggest thing though would be whatever recommendations. Particularly is that may include recommendations for what position like the city take. The FOP negotiations. And also any other recommendations that we have for the department. That's going to be a big piece. That's what may take most of the work.
You mean specific to the governance committee or all of the subcommittees?
I think it's going to, not necessarily breaking out into subcommittees. There's enough work for the government. Some of it may fall more logically into the subcommittee structure. I'm assuming that we might have some recommendations about retention, training. Those might logically fall to folks that are more HR oriented. But honestly, I think it's something we're all going to have to take pieces of it.
Okay. Any more discussion?
That's all I have.
Okay, human resources and finance. Tristan.
So as we know, our fearless leader is not available today, it's Richards. But I did want to talk about the training that we attended last week. We had the honor of sitting in the presence of Craig and Zach and Stacy. Who provide Stacy Doty, who provided a wonderful presentation to help the HR committee navigate the process of how we manage our employees and giving us wonderful data points that we could use to best capture the role of our auditor and our deputy auditor. So moving forward, I have a couple of things on the standard human resources, but one of them will probably put on ice. And so more overly, what I think we're going to be doing in the near future is creating, and Caitlin, I'm going to tap you in a few seconds. We're going to be putting the information in a data spreadsheet so we can best have our auditor and our deputy auditor and Mr. Fields in the interim be able to capture the information that is necessary for us to be able to track not only the complaints, but the nature of the complaints, and make sure that the citizens' complaints when they come in and we're able to determine exactly where they are in the investigation and so forth. This is largely important for the same reason it's important to create a budget to determine where your money is going, how much is coming in, how much is going out. We deserve to give the citizens back and accountability for not only our role, but to make sure that they understand that the significance of their complaints are heard and being captured and tracked. Things would, of course, be instrumental to our report at the end of the year. So we're going to come up with a more refined space to capture the complaint process. I know, Mr. Peoples, that this is something that you've been doing, and you would love to on the HR committee, if you would be present, because this may be something that will be important for transitioning Mr. Fields to the role. So I think it would be important for you to be present when we begin those discussions about capturing and tracking the process. Furthermore, this will help us to develop how we can give more oversight to the deputy auditor and our auditor. Turn over to Kate. I'm really quick, and I'll talk about the next one.
Yeah, I think just stemming from that conversation and that wonderful presentation we had, just really starting to figure out how this board can look at things systemically so we can make recommendations with fidelity, so that we also can look at how we're allocating our time and our resources. Because we want to make sure we hear a lot of different things, but we want to be able to look and be able to identify, hey, we're seeing this pop up X number of times. It's been brought up, and it's been a unique situation that we've had to sit in and answer the phone or field those emails that we may not have otherwise done in the absence of our auditor. But I think it really has been beneficial because we've gained a new perspective. So it was brought up last week that we have people who are reaching out and they're not within Akron, or who they're reaching out, they just need resources. And just figuring out how we can support that process if there may need to be recommendations down the line. So really just kind of figuring out a system to capture all of that, so that when we come together as a board, we can kind of have a more thorough overview and be able to move forward. So I think it would be a really great thing, and I think it'd be a great way for all of us to collaborate with HR and figure out how that plays into the different work.
Absolutely. So in the near future, hopefully before the end of this year, and maybe before we hire our new auditor, we are looking for programming software, even if in the interim it's as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, to begin capturing the data in a more formal manner. And again, we want to get percentages. We want to be able to measure the impact that the board is having on the complaint process, and making sure that we're able to determine how we are outsourcing different information that we capture to determine what are we doing, how are we useful, and how are we helping the community to obtain access to different resources. Secondly, and again, I want to be cautious, but we did receive the background checks of the 2 admin 3 positions. They were sent to us today in our emails. I don't want to discuss them publicly. We may go into a brief executive session a little later. We will not vote on anything today, because I want to make sure that all of us are here. We can review the information that was captured here today. But again, we did receive the background checks back from the Akron Police Department on our 2 candidates for the admin 3 position. And that is in our email, and we will be discussing that a little later. Okay. So, with that being said, last but not least, I believe we are still waiting, to get all of the contractual agreements that's executed for you, Mr. Fields. But nevertheless, I am appreciative that you are here. And we appreciate your presence and just want to continue to ask you for your patience. I am. Oh, okay, sorry. It was done this morning, okay, dismiss everything I said. So awesome, so we officially have you with us on the board and the HR committee and HR through the city, we're gonna be able to take you come. So official welcome to you, we're so glad to have you.
And just to clarify, what he said was done this morning, it's in the contract executed. or-
Yes, Bev sent me a text this morning. I assume she sent it to them. Yes, so, what happened, Bev sent a text this morning and told me that the department finished with that. And if I could reach out to Mr. Fields and let him know what the next steps are. So I did do that. But I thought I apologize, I thought she sent it to everybody. She sent it to. So I contacted Mr. Fields and I'll just let him tell you, you know, what he did upon that contact, because I wasn't there. And I had also asked Bev, I said, well, I'm not sure what the next steps are because she hadn't communicated that. So then she texted me back and said, well, you need to next talk with human resources. So I guided him to go to do that. So, but when we can.
Oh, well, by the way, really quickly, Mr. Fields, just to inform the public, in our meeting last week with Human Resources, we were able to get information in reference to the way that they can assist us in helping to offer support for our employees at our discretion. What that means is because our employees that are given oversight by the Citizens Oversight Board, they are still getting paid from the city and so forth. So he's going to have to get clearance through the city to access documents. Craig, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
No, yeah, we'll run through a background check.
So there's various aspects that Mr. Fields is going to have to go through in reference to getting clearance through city processes. And so they were able to walk us through the various ways that they can assist us in helping to onboard him and give him the necessary materials that he will need in order to be able to access all of the information that's necessary for his role.
So I did contact HR this morning. Spoke with the Chrissy there. Chrissy indicated that she had not yet received the one to start the appointment process. I provided my contact information, cell phone, and email address, and she assured me that just as soon as the paperwork came down, that they would be in for an appointment. Photographed.
Did she tell you how long that would take?
Well, she didn't give me any specifics, but based on our conversation, forthcoming.
Okay. Well, if you need me to follow up, text on. If you haven't heard in a couple of days, just let me know. Call Stacy and see. I mean, I feel personally we waited long enough. This contract thing to go through 15 different things, whatever. Now we're there, so let's let him get started. So, and I had asked him to speak with either Yamini Atkins or Stacy Doty, but Mr. Fields told me that Chrissy told him that she can't. So I don't know who Chrissy is.
So,
She works with
That's-
HR.
I'm sorry.
She works with HR.
Well, I assume that, but I don't know, because I remember when we met with you all last week. I had gotten the impression from Yami that as soon as the contract came through, he could hit, they could hit the ground running. But now it sounds like there's gonna be another delay. So I'm just concerned about that. From Chrissy, had it come from Yami or Stacy, then okay, but I don't know who this Chrissy person is.
So I'm hoping in the near future, hopefully within the next week or two, what will probably be one of the first things that you two do. When I say you two, you and Mr. Peoples.
Yeah, we're gonna work together.
Yeah, perfect.
So
So I
he's
think
ready
that
to
can
take
happen
it
in the
over
meantime.
and I'm not gonna just throw some rules.
Perfect.
And if he's ready to take it over, he's got the phone now
Okay,
and I'll briefly go over that. And the complaint process as far as complaints how they're being given to me now. I wanna,
so with him having the phone, I just want to make some, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. We probably need to wait until
wait,
Human Resources finishes what they're doing. He hasn't been onboarded yet.
I understand
The
it.
contract's been executed though, he's,
Yeah.
for all purposes, he's our agent, he's working on behalf of the board, so. If the contract has in fact been executed, then it sounds like there are some outstanding things to be done with respect to the receipt of information from the city. Or,
And there's an IT issue too. This is what we were talking.
I think I guess I'll just, and again, folks, HR is not my lane, you know what I'm saying, like, criminal justice and civilian oversight, but I think one thing that probably needs to be clarified is, because of the nature of some of the information coming in and information flowing from the city, there's, very likely to be sensitive or confidential information. So one, there may have to be a full background check, and two, there may have to be a non-disclosure agreement. Again, I want to defer all of that to HR, but it's just because the nature of the complaints that may come in, there might be sensitive information, citizen sensitive information, and then definitely the information that from Mr. Fields or any of your auditors ultimately to do the work. It's definitely sensitive information coming through. So I think that's something we're definitely gonna have to dot the i's, cross the t's on. And then that might. I'll leave it up to all of you answering the phone, maybe not the most sensitive of issue, you know what I'm saying, but yeah, definitely you want to be careful with what information you receive and who. And making sure that everything's lined up as far as that.
Okay, so in that vein, the IT, wouldn't he need to be set up with IT?
That would be definitely the whole onboarding process. Like when we think of onboarding, we think about, like you said, getting your picture taken, getting some sort of temporary ID, getting an Akron email address like all of you have, getting all of that situated. That definitely is a component of HR and the onboarding process. Yes.
So do we need to then continue to wait until Chrissy gets back with him? I want this to be a smooth,
So I think it's something we can determine. I agree with you.
this needs to be a smooth transition.
I would recommend following up with Downey and Stacy.
Yeah, I'll call him
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Get everybody on the same page.
Let me call him tomorrow. Because this needs to be a smooth, because once he goes through HR, then the next step is IT. That was my understanding. Am I correct? So let's just kind of.
We'll table that, Mr. Peoples, any direction about when the actual transition process can occur, like switching funds. That will come from Bev, and Rich. So, the process of what you do when having discussions about your role and how you take the complaint process is fine.
Yeah.
But, any transfer of city property or
Yeah,
anything like that.
And you can actually utilize this time, this space to really get him acclimated to, you can, like some of the emails that we get, some of the things that bizarre or not, that people are asking us to do, just kind of, clue him in on that, what we can and cannot do with something. And you're smart enough to know, we're not taking place from out of state,
Right.
but Well, we did get emails from people complaining about what was done to them out of school, you know, that kind of thing. So if you could just talk to them about some of those things and, you know, we don't ever want to not respond to anybody, regardless whether they're within our jurisdiction or not. But in cases like that, I usually just say thank you for your email. Leave it at that. But Mr. Peoples, you can delve into it further. Tim.
And Mr. Fields, this is the last thing I'm gonna close out this section. We are hopefully in the HR committee, so in our subcommittee meeting. I don't want to take the lead on this. We have to determine that from them and things she'd like to do. I'm hoping that we can have something formal for you so that we can actually introduce you to some of the expectations that we have. And if Mr. Peoples is available, that's great, no worries. And kind of dive into the information that Craig sent us. That'll give you a more overview of what our expectations are. We can send it to you.
I've already sent it to you. Absolutely. I've sent it to you. He's been looking at it.
Can I just ask a clarifying question with that process? Now, I know we've gone back and forth, the contract is with Thomas Fields and Associates, or are there any other entities within your organization that need to be part of that onboarding process?
No.
It'll just be you? Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Good question. Thank you. And so we have human resources. All right, Mr. Costa, you're up, finance.
Because they not much of a report, I think I was asked in the second meeting each month to report on when we're at finance.
Okay.
So I was gonna say, I would do that at our
Okay.
next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Community engagement, I guess you're up.
Yeah, I'll take that, since, this is not here today, so we did have we had National Night Out that we kind of talked about. Just what that experience was, and I think we had good representation at most of the boards where we were able to stop out. And meet with the vendors and just kind of interact, and I was at Board 7 and we kind of talked about some of our experiences. And just looking at all the pictures and how they were all different from board to board, just seeing those great experiences with music and dancing and everything. But being able to get out there and share information about the board and also the meet and greet that we did on Sunday. So we did have an event. It was at Mason Community Learning Center. We had a great turnout. We had vendors who came from community resources across the city. We did a introduction of the board, and then we also did a great question and answer session. We had questions that were geared towards the board, and then we noticed a lot of the questions were geared towards our APD representatives who joined us for the event as well. So we really had some great questions. We had great insight that was shared from citizens, from the police representatives who were there. So it was a great event. I think it was a good jumping off point for where the events can go moving forward. So we were very pleased with that, and we're excited to move that one forward. So that's kind of where we're at with community engagement. That was our big project. We're reflecting on that. And then Mr. Giffen.
Just to add, I think we've been working on a potential survey. And after the discussion at the last committee meeting, there was really felt that the direction that we could best go with the survey might be more directed towards trying to understand police interaction with the community, and as opposed to impressions about the board itself. So I contacted Michelle Henry, with the firm that we're in communicating with, and we got a revised proposal earlier this week. So we'll process that in the next committee meeting and hopefully have something to do.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Next up, complaints, Mr. Peoples, you're up.
Well, I've been playing catch up since I haven't had the phone in my occasion. I did send everybody some emails today on some of the cases. Mr. Greenway, this complaint was done on the 6th of July, reference 427 Black Street. Spoke to my email, Sergeant Leaper, this is an ongoing investigation, so there's nothing else to be said about that. It's still under investigation. Another complaint that's been closed out has been Chance Wilkins, 6/17/23. Received a email from Sergeant Leaper. They reached out to Mr. Wilkins several times by phone. He's not returning the call, so they closed him out. I received several anonymous complaints today that were filed today with the police department. And they were primarily with misconduct and brutality involved in the police department. The complaint was taken also today on behalf of Nathaniel Parsons of reference threats and discrimination by the police department. I also worked on getting a log sheet together, got that all put together right now, just putting it up. And I'm going to show Mr. Fields that once I get that completed. And I just have one thing else to say. We're talking about the emails, I think, several weeks ago. Threats.
Before you go there, can I interject?
Yeah.
On these complaints that are coming in anonymous, how are you able to get back? But I mean, if
They need phone,
okay, so
but they're not giving it.
okay, so when the Akron police, this is Sergeant
Leaper.
Lipa, when he closes it out, then it gets bumped to you. Is that correct?
I get
Okay,
the
so
phone.
then do you call them and find out if they're satisfied with it being closed out?
They get a copy of that.
No, but I'm saying as the auditor, a temporary auditor standing.
I haven't called back.
Call them.
No, I haven't called
Okay.
back.
Because I'm thinking,
But they do get a letter from the police. saying
right,
that.
I understand that, but I'm saying if the sergeant is closing it out, then I would think that we still need to follow up
Yeah.
with the complainant and see if they're satisfied with it being closed out, or is it
Right.
something else they
No,
want us to
we'll
look
call.
into,
We can call.
you know?
How long? Or how many attempts they,
No, he didn't tell me how many attempts, but he said in the email attempt to call. There's no answer, so they sent a letter out. He sent a copy of the letter to me. And I believe I sent it to everybody. Yeah,
Because we can't just rely on what the police say, well, we closed it out
Right.
because we couldn't reach them. You know, that's why we're here, just to follow up as well. Because if frankly, if they close out their investigation, then that gives us room to follow up on the investigation, correct?
yeah, it does. I just think it would be nice for us to get a little more clarity about, their processes.
Why they closed it
Is it
out.
one call or two calls, how many tries, the time frame?
Well, it was my understanding that the auditor can also serve as that bridge, so filling in if APD is reporting that they're trying to get in contact and there hasn't been any success. But then our auditor, just based upon that relational capacity and being a little bit more distant, could then follow up with a call and say, hey, they've been trying to reach out, this is part of the process, and maybe explain that, and then maybe that would connect the two to complete what was needed. Were there any attempts with that at all?
No. And I haven't gotten back to speak yet, so
Okay,
I
I'm
got
gonna
these
go on
complaints
vacation.
today.
Because we, not saying, and this is not throwing shade on that police, so I hope nobody, emails me from the police department, say, hey, we have to be a little bit more diligent in our follow-up, because, they're getting a lot of complaints. But one reason why I think we're sitting here as a board is because our diligence to the community on their complaints need to take 2 or 3 or 4, maybe more steps further than what the Akron police took the complaint, just to be sure. And we need to, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the complainant is satisfied with whatever their complaint was and how it was resolved or not resolved.
Okay, what exactly does that look like?
Just, okay, so this is just what I heard. Now, I don't, if it's different, then let me know. Sergeant Lipa, there were 2 of them that he closed out, correct?
He closed out the Chance Wilkins, received the email from Sergeant Leaper. Reached out, tried to make contact with this person and returned the call.
Okay.
So really, if they reached out and it's not they can't reach them, I'm gonna try it, and if I can't reach them,
Yeah, I mean,
there's nothing more to do.
if you
have to
try
do
them,
something.
then
Right.
that's all I'm saying, is that
Right.
when they say they close something out, we still need to follow up and make sure that we, as much as possible, put forth enough effort to see if we can talk to the person, because they may or may not know that they were closed out by the police. I mean, we don't know what's going on with them, you know, maybe they just missed the call or something.
Uh, so, what are some suggestions you have? And I'm just thinking of my own personal experience. I have filed a complaint related to customer service experience, negative customer service experience I have. When they close it out, if we say they're not satisfied, what?
No, well, then I think we would ask them what would they like the board to do. And then if it's something that's within our power to do, we can try to do it. If not, then we'll have to find a way to articulate that, to know what our boundaries are, what, you know, what we can and cannot do. You know, I just think, you know, it's about satisfying the complaint as much as we can. Everyone's not gonna be satisfied, we know that. We already know that. But as long as we know within ourselves, we've done our very best with those complaining persons, then we can feel good about what we've done.
So what I would recommend, Mr. Fields, in the future, I do agree for patients that I try to outreach and so forth, I mark the number of times I try to reach them. So it'd be important to track your attempts.
That's in the logs that I put in, how many times I call.
Okay.
Yeah, those are in the logs.
And so even if the police department does 1 or 2 calls, we can say, well, you've been called a total of 5 times. Which is so, this kind of gives us the ability to track how much we try to outreach them. So that.
And if we have their address, just as the police sends them a letter saying, hey, we tried to reach you, we couldn't do it. If you get that same result, then maybe we could do the same thing. Just say, this is from the CPO people, where we've tried to reach out to you, rather than your complaint, we've not been able to reach you. And then at this time, we could maybe talk about how we craft a letter like that.
That's a big
Stand it
deal.
up.
If they give you their address, a lot of times.
Yeah,
They don't.
yeah.
How
If we have it.
A lot of times they don't want their address. People just get the phone number.
Or even if they contact us through our email.
Yeah, you
You know,
can.
you can say it, you know, we tried, we've attempted. If you need us further, let us know, but at this time that, you know, it's closed, the matter's closed, we have not been able to reach. But we can, if we need to, we can talk about how to craft a standard email response or something like that. You know, I just don't want citizens to think that we're kicking them to the curb, lack of a better term. Because the police did it, now that's what we're doing, and we might do it, but we want to at least close it out properly. That's all I'm saying.
But we also need to let people know that, back to the emails. This was mentioned before. I know they're under a lot of stress. And I know they're being told a lot of different things. But you have to understand we're working within our boundaries. Can't do but so much right now because we're still evolving.
Sure.
And you have to be careful words you use. Because some people can't perceive those words as threats. You can be upset and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to word it in a certain type of way so it doesn't come off as a threat. And I'm not saying that to try to tell you how to vent, but sometimes words can come off to other people as a threat. And that's not good. Being a board, we're doing our best right now. We'll continue to do our best for the community. But one thing that we cannot tolerate, will not tolerate, is a threat, or any type of disrespect towards any board member. And that will have to be addressed if that happens. But don't get me wrong, we are here for you. And we're gonna work for you. If you hear something, say it, so we can
Yeah, and just for the record, my opinion, this is something to talk about later. But if we do feel like something isn't a egregious threat, I think we can all take it upon ourselves to follow up with that particular complaint. Don't have to go directly to the police department.
Right.
I agree with that. I mean, we've got some pretty. Like, we've gotten a couple of nasty emails from people. But that doesn't bother me. I realize people have their issues about us and what's going on in their lives. That doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I sympathize with it, that they're so angry and they're feeling like they're not being heard or their issues aren't being resolved. But none of us on this board, we're all here volunteering our time, for the citizens of this community, including the police department. And none of us should be subject to and or have to tolerate being threatened by him. And I don't think any of us will tolerate that. And we have gotten some. And the only thing I can say is if they continue, I will use the resources, frankly, available to me to deal with it if they go too far.
I just ask a few clarifying questions. Mr. Peoples, when you have that log finalized, will you be able to share that with all of us? Perfect. And when you're doing that log, are you tracking these emails as well? Like,
Yes,
just
I
to
am.
give us a little bit of context.
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect.
When I get the emails, I put everything on this log. This log is, it's a mess, but I know how to read it. I'm sure it's not. Phone calls. I list those. Complaints are on their own. So there's no question about this, that, or third. It's everything that I can do. So once I get it all done, I'll bring it.
Rick, do you have about a time frame when you think that will be done for us?
It's gonna be done before I turn everything.
Hopefully by the next week.
I hope to have it.
Okay. And then just lost. I think I'll bring it back. Thank you so much.
So do you think it's necessary to have like a feedback loop on there too? Or
So I think, we'll explain it.
well, maybe we'll never scratch that. I guess we can do that when we look at that program. I'm thinking more about the
I
program.
think we're thinking the same.
Yeah, okay.
And we're looking to have access to, it, so that way, it's something that all of us can see. And
Right, feedback. You get feedback to what the outcomes were, what you feel the outcomes might be.
That's what makes it perfect. For instance, if you're out of town, theoretically, this would be Mr. Fields. And for whatever reason, we see someone, we can say, hey, I'll get back to you, because we have access to look in and see where the complaint is and so forth. So it's kind of enhancing accessibility. So we'll do that in the future. We're going to craft something that we all have access to. But Mr. Peoples, we thank you. I know you are doing a full-time person's job. And I know how that
Your
can
job,
feel.
it's a challenge, but I enjoy doing it. Of Mr. Fields. So we pull into, once his paperwork and everything is done. We'll be.
We'll be looking forward to that, and we are looking forward to the presentation. I don't want to do it in front of the entire board if it's something we want to do. One of our, maybe HR, perhaps you turn it over.
Yeah, no problem.
I apologize. I thought I
Okay,
might. Do you have the number of calls that we've received since the last report out?
Not offhand.
Then do you?
It actually, the phone has actually been, not ringing as much as I thought it would be since I got it back from vacation. Hasn't been ringing at all. So that's a good thing, but it's also kind of scary too. Because I don't know if it's all gonna come,
Only time
which is,
will tell.
it's just gonna happen, but it's just, it comes in waves, I guess.
Time will tell.
So,
My final question, so when we heard in the report out last time, there were 2 commendations of the police that came through the auditor's phone line. Were there any calls like that since the last
Yep.
report out? Thank you so much.
So, I think that's a good thing to just make sure that we will kind of craft what we're looking for report outs. Number of calls, there were any accommodation calls. And number of emails, so just kind of make it more concise, we didn't need that. Create that for you, so I think maybe having a template for report out.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll tweak it up. I think we can come up with something. Which will, I'm saying feedback with my impressions with it. Maybe a complicated call that came, what impressions might be there.
I think we should, I think another good idea for this student. That maybe use, possibly use a color for complaints and color proof phone calls. So you can just look at, okay, it's a blue, it's a complaint, it's a yellow, it's a phone console. So you don't have to count, try to figure out for stats, you know, by the color. I think the color codes will burn out a lot too. Anything that's not able to be resolved by us referred to another agency, color code is something different. So at the end of the year, when you put your numbers, just go through this plug.
What's gonna be really helpful is to get some programming that calculate all that stuff for us, yeah. Mr. Gifford, you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
Yeah, so like, just imagine an Excel spreadsheet, like, it's kind of what we're talking about, which the cells and the columns would be already numbered.
Right.
Plus you would kind of just have a category by each of the rows, as to was this action, was this action, was this action that we did, what date, etc. So.
And I actually think that that's something that we, again, as a board, like you had mentioned, I think that's something all of us can do. Just to fine tune it, just to make sure that it's the best type of a spreadsheet that we could possibly have. Well, I don't think just the human resource subcommittee should be the only people to help refine something that's going to be so important for us now and in the future to keep our stats and look at trends and all that type of thing.
But I think the creation, so it sounds like Mr. Peoples is already starting with that, so
Yeah.
he's pre-provided one when we went through this form and initiated the complaint subcommittee. Then Mr. Peoples has kind of created his own, and that's kind of the perspective of the complaint committee, hey, this is what we're capturing. And then I think HR would be the next to look at it,
Yes.
just so that they have the oversight, how does this impact the day-to-day job obligations of our staff? So I think that's where we'll all eventually get our eyes on it, but it makes sense that it kind of works through those channels first, so that everybody gets input on it, but then the outcome of that product is what we're gonna use as a board to.
Well, that was my point. In the final analysis, I think everyone's input.
So I think for the software, one of the ideas would be to outreach some other auditors and see what they're using. Instead of reinventing. See what they're using and then that can kind of help us to shop.
Mr. Costa, that maybe be something that we add to that University of Akron research projects. Some variation.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea in terms of, so what are the most common softwares that are being used among these auditor offices across the country for similar size jurisdictions?
Yeah, that might be helpful. Because I think
Next one,
that'll kind of drive, once we get that information, we figure out what our system is, back to that annual report, a lot of that would drive what is presented there.
I think another approach might be that.
Oh, yes.
Lastly, complaints, Mr. Fields, is there anything else you want to say or I know I sent you all the materials that we, HR so graciously gave us last week. We were just all three of we left there kicking our heels and snapping our fingers. We were so happy. Is there anything you want to say about some of the materials that you've gone through already? If you have any questions, this is the guy to ask here if you have any questions at all.
No, not at this time. Go through my material a couple of times, so I got a full understanding of it. And, have some questions.
It's self-explanatory
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
All right, so, there's nothing else on the complaints. We're gonna move on to new business. And this was, a police ride-along. That was my idea to put on the agenda. I just want to know what the board thinks about board members doing police ride-alongs.
I think that's a good idea to, if you've never been on a ride along with a police officer, I think that's a good thing to do. See to the officers. Myself, being a policeman for 21 years, I pretty much have an idea of what they do, because I did it. But I would still like to do right along because I don't know how accurate they and how they do it. So I think us being board, I think that would be a learning experience to go on right along with the police department, because a lot of the things that we may not understand, you'll understand and get the complaints. Then you can think about what you saw on the ride along and understand different things that go on in the officer's tour, the stressors, how they run from call to call, what they have to endure, and watch them work, and that will help you understand. I hope understand more.
And also, well, I used to do ride-alongs, but that's when I worked for ambulance. And I did them just to, even though I was working there as a dispatcher and a communications technician, I still learned things actually riding with them. Things that may not necessarily come through the dispatch area or come through on a phone call or something like that. And I think that it's really prudent that we do that, and for the reasons that you just stated, but I also think it's a good way to build individual relationships with some of the police officers, because there's still a consensus, from what I understand, from not all the police officers, but for some of the police officers, that this board is out to get them, and that is so far from the truth. That is not the truth at all, and I don't know where they're getting that impression from. I don't even know where the meetings that we've had thus far, I can't even see how they might be getting that impression from our meeting team. So I don't know where that's coming from, but I think having the board members do these ride-alongs won't hurt. I think it's I don't see a downside. I'll put it that way. I don't see a downside to us doing it.
I did a ride along not very long after we started. It was very enlightening.
Share. Please share.
Well, I don't want to take up a lot of time. It was very enlightening. It was a Saturday night, mostly in Kenmore. But I would certainly recommend it. I'm kind of ready to do it again. I've learned a great deal, just that one.
Excellent.
And
Thank
Beth
you.
Richards has done as well too.
I'm sorry.
Beth Richards has also
Okay.
done.
Okay.
I've done a police ride along before when I worked with the community support services, but it was a mental health one. It was still like, I can't wait.
So, I don't know if this is a big photo on. I don't think so. I just wanted to bring it up because I just think.
Deputy Harding, I think after our very first meeting, he did send that information to all of us, if anybody's interested in getting that set up. He gave us that contact information. I haven't saved, so if anybody.
Yeah, could you email that to me?
Yep,
It was very easy. I mean, I think actually, it may have been right after that, but It's arranged just same day. I called, I was doing it by. So it's very easy, I really.
Yeah, I think we'll be excellent. And I had mentioned it in Sunday's event. And I saw a couple people in the audience shaking their heads, no. And that's their prerogative, but, you know, I think it's a good idea, and any of the citizens that are watching this meeting today, I would encourage you to do it. You know, you can learn a lot from people who you think you have opposition with. Sometimes they can learn a lot from you as well, so, you know, we're all here to learn from one another. As well as getting.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I have another item.
Sure.
Not clear to me whether everybody's get an email from Mary Patterson and Nicole about our expired membership.
Yes,
Okay, I'd like to move that we do our membership.
Second check.
yes, yeah, I did, and it expired June 30th.
We're still members. Anyway, the motion's okay. Second.
Okay. All right, so everybody in agreement with that? Roll call.
Do we get discussion real quick, just questions, have we looked at the cost of what that membership is for the total board, has that been evaluated?
It was, it was my understanding that the cost would cover the entire board rather than each individual board, based upon the way that they read.
And is that a line item that was already accounted for in the budget, or is that something that we would have to look at?
We did have a line item, we did have a line item on the budget specifically for memberships. Membership, but it's not specifically for like, if that makes sense.
Right,
Can be a
when
lot.
I joined before the board was formed. And I guess that's, I have gotten an individual email saying that my expired. But that was before we proceeded. I didn't know that once we proceeded that the board paid for it.
Well, I think that's a different thing. I think there's an organizational membership, which is what she's talking.
Okay,
Now, what that entitles individuals to do, I really don't know. I think I sent an email around. I mean, I joined individually too, and I want to talk about it 2 weeks next time. I'm planning to go to the convention.
yeah, well,
But anyway, motion's made and seconded. I
okay,
think it would be very important for us to keep that relationship on.
Yeah, and we do specifically have a line item under our budget for the NAPL membership. Now, whether or not that line item, the amount that's been allocated is consistent with what the membership cost is this year, is something that we need to just confirm, but that is something that I can get taken care of.
any more discussion?
Just for context, it looks like it's going to be for the organizational membership 500.
Okay, that is. So this is for the, this is for NAPL, which is the National Community,
National Association of Citizens Oversight of Law Enforcement. NACOL.
Organization.
All right, more discussion? Okay, we'll do roll call. Costa,
yes.
Gibbons,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Castle,
Yes.
Peoples,
Yes.
and Skevich, yes.
Before we, oh, sorry.
Oh, and just a quick point, the amount that was allocated for that membership was $800, so it was a little,
Okay.
surplus in terms of that. So I will get that taken care of for us.
Really quickly, I just want to motion to go into executive session related to a personnel matter.
Second.
Old business,
Sorry, that was.
That would be business. Business, I thought that originally.
Sorry.
This is done.
well, let's just do old business. Okay, The NACO conference. Mr. Gibbon has already, agreed to go. It is, as I mentioned before, it's November 12th through 16th, something like that.
That's it.
Okay, and I've spoken with our chairman about this. We think at least two people need to go. That way we'll have two different perspectives, coming back on the report of coming back. So, I think though we should wait until we have a full board here in order to decide how we're going to vote on who should go or who we want to go or how that's gonna go. I just think it's better to have a full board here to do that. So if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to agree that we send two people, but we table it from that point on until the full board is here.
Just so it's clear, I'm okay.
Yeah, you said that, you mentioned.
So would it be two in junction with Mr. Gibbon, or are you looking at two total?
I'm looking at two total. Any more discussion about it? So can I have a motion that we table it until the full board is here?
Should have taken.
And Mr. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbon,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Ms. Peoples.
Yes.
Castle.
Yes.
And Skevich, yes. Okay, now,
I'd like to motion that we go into brief executive session in reference to a personnel matter.
a second.
So just gonna have everyone at.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Costa,
Yes.
Gibbon,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Castle,
Yes.
Peoples,
Yes.
and Skevich, yes. Thank you all for coming. We'll be adjourning now.
I move we adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
That's what she just, I thought that's what she just did.
There was a motion to in second.
Oh, okay, all right. Second, Mr. House,
Yes.
Mr. Giffen, Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Ms. Castle.
Yeah.
Mr. Peoples.
Yes.
Ms. Kelly, yes.
Thank you.
And thanks to Matt for